And a good Saturday morning to you. Thanks for joining us here on KION. Luis Alvarez is back from the CES. That is the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And he has a report for us. Hi, Luis.
How are you, Mark?
Doing well. Tell us, what was the big talk down there in Vegas?
Well, the big talk was the new 4K, as they call them, Ultra High-Def TVs. They actually came out last year in the Consumer Electronics Show in 2013, but this year's when all the manufacturers had production models out on the floor that these are TVs that you're going to be able to buy. Actually, should be available now, but all of them will soon be in stores near you, and they're amazing. I mean, the quality, we're used to high-definition TVs, right? We all have seen them. Most of us have them in our homes on one size or another. Imagine something that is so clear that you can stand right up to it. It looks like you're looking out a window.
So that's even more high definition than high definition.
More high def than high def, yeah.
So on a factor, if you had to look at it, say a comparison, like is it 3-to-1, 2-to-1, 4-to-1?
It's 10-to-1.
10-to-1.
10-to-1, the ratio.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's an amazing experience. The downside is that you only get the full experience if something is being broadcast in ultra high def. So, if you have an ultra high def or UHD screen and you're looking at traditional HD, it's just going to look like traditional HD. So The other big announcement was that a lot of the pay-for companies like Netflix, HBO, and Cinemax, they're announcing that they're going to start broadcasting this year in ultra high def in order to take advantage of these TVs. So you're going to have some content that you'll be able to look at, but it'll take a while. It's almost like back when high def was first seen on cable and on satellite TV. You had one or two channels that you could get on high def, and the rest were just standard definition. And I think you're going to see the same thing. It's probably going to take close to 2 years in order to convert a significant amount of the content over to ultra high def. But I tell you, it's amazing to see, and some of the form factors of these TVs, they got as big as 147 inches that they were showing at the show.
I guess sports is probably going to be one of the first things in ultra high D.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. In fact, the Super Bowl this year is going to be broadcast in ultra high def.
Okay.
For those people that happen to have ultra high def TVs already or will rush out to buy them in the next couple of weeks before the Super Bowl, you'll be able to watch the game in this crystal clear screen that is available to you. But, that was just one of the things that you saw. The other thing that struck me at the CES was the number of what we call eye health devices or fitness devices to track your health and fitness. Many of us are familiar with the companies like Fitbit or Jawbone that make those little devices that let us track the number of steps and the number of stairs we climb, those sorts of things. Well, now there's all sorts of new devices coming out, and all of them are going to be connected to the internet, and all of them are going to be able to produce all sorts of information about your body.
Boy, that sure is great, and it's going to be very helpful for people, I think, because it's going to be harder to get in to see doctors now. And a lot of people are going to discover that their medical providers, as we roll out this new healthcare system that's coming down on us, it's going to be tougher to get into to see your doctors. Take longer to do that, and you're going to need to, and you're going to want to, I think, look at other means of kind of self-diagnosis or tips on staying healthier.
Well, I think people have gotten used to taking more control of their own health. It started with just the internet, and I know most people, when they get ill and when they start feeling achy or have certain symptoms, they'll go on the internet first before they ever even think about going to see a doctor to kind of self-diagnose. And we have all these resources available to us. And these fitness devices will let us measure our heart rate. There's even devices that can help you manage stress because it warns you if you're getting into a stressful situation by measuring your pulse as well as the heat on the skin and how you're reacting to certain events. And it'll help people that have issues dealing with stress. You have devices that will help diabetics. Google just announced a device that it's a microchip that can be implanted in contact lenses.
Okay.
That allows people who have blood sugar problems, diabetics, to measure their blood sugar once every second, as opposed to having to poke themselves periodically.
Boy, that is going to be a real... I know several diabetics, and the last thing they always hated having to do that was to poke themselves. I mean, you get used to it, but then you don't. You know what I mean? There's never a day that wouldn't go by where you wouldn't mind not having to poke yourself and bleed.
Exactly. And the idea that this does it in every second means that you don't have to worry about, well, am I measuring at the right time of day? Am time. Did I just catch myself at a good time or a bad time? And it can warn you if your blood sugar levels are spiking or dropping. So those kind of devices that allow us to micromanage our health, I think are going to be a significant trend in the near future.
All right, let's move on to a couple of other things. I'm curious, at the CES, was there much talk about the big Target hack? And by the way, this probably would not surprise you this morning, and I'm not surprised by it at all. But apparently, some more news reports are coming out that say that the code, or at least a good portion of the code that was used to hack into the Target system, was written in Russian.
Yeah, not surprising at all. Not surprising at all. The biggest threats we have don't come from within the U.S. They come from either Eastern Europe or China and the Far East. So the idea that the hackers were coming out of Russia does not surprise me at all.
Okay. I'm sure this is going to be an ongoing story. We'll learn more about it. But we've talked about that before, that a lot of the hacking of people's bank accounts and credit card information and so forth originating behind the old Iron Curtain, so to speak.
Yeah, and people are doing it there to make money. Finding a way to monetize that cyber attacks is not new. It's just getting more and more sophisticated.
All right. And then let's see. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was any talk at CES about NSA, privacy, and anyone talking about new forms of encryption that would be able to keep people like the NSA and others from hacking into and snooping on us?
Well, surprisingly little. I mean, I expected to see more vendors and startup companies with security products, and there were a few, including some that claim that they would be hack-proof even from the NSA. But by and large, I think that the consumers that go to this particular show, they don't really think about that. They don't see themselves as targets, and it tends to be more business people who are concerned about that. And there was a couple of vendors there who were geared specifically to small businesses, showing them products that can allow them to encrypt all of their devices, all their mobile devices, phones, iPads, tablets, laptops, so that in case they lose any of those devices, they're not going to be compromised and the data on them, stolen. So there was a few of those, but not as many as I would have expected.
Now, the next thing we want to talk about here is a ruling the other day out of the D.C. Appeals Court that shot down net neutrality rules. And the first thing, before you referenced to me, you sent me a link to an article that was on dailytech.com. First thing I want to ask you is, when you looked at the headline, and the headline, let me read it to you verbatim. D.C. Appeals Court shoots down arbitrarily enforced net neutrality rules. First and foremost, you know this issue. Is that an accurate headline? I mean, yes, they did shoot down the net neutrality rules, but were they arbitrarily enforced, and is that headline accurate?
It's accurate in the sense that a lot of people that when this ruling came out said net neutrality is dead. But if you read the ruling from the judges in the D.C. Appeals Court, they didn't say that net neutrality was a bad thing. In fact, they said that it's a perfectly legitimate vehicle for the FCC to use, but what they disagreed with was the way that it was being applied to certain types of companies, but not others. So, for example, the FCC allowed in their rules, the regulations that were shot down, they allowed wireless companies like Verizon and AT&T to throttle internet access, but not landline cables, or landline companies like Comcast and Charter Communications. And that's what the court had heartburn with. They said, look, if you're going to have a rule, it has to be the rule for everybody. It can't be rules for some and not others. So the thinking is that this is going to go back, and the FCC is going to rewrite some of the rules, and it may see the court again. It doesn't end here. And the thing that people need to understand about net neutrality is what the FCC is trying to do, and I'm an advocate of net neutrality, by the way, is to limit the way that the carriers could impact your use of the internet. Imagine a world where Comcast could say, well, you want YouTube, you have to pay extra $10 a month if you want YouTube. Or you can use our own on-demand service, which is available to you with the basic cable subscription. The idea that the carriers are now getting into the content business means that they can start deciding what you can see and what you can't see and force you to pay more for the stuff that maybe you want that's not included in their basic package. Think of it like you do your cable subscription. It could look the same way.
Now, see, and we're thinking about this. A big part of our business as we move forward is the digital domain. And
exactly.
In some instances, we have as many listeners online to our stream of KION as we do terrestrially. right?
Right.
So what would stop a competitor, either another broadcast company or Pandora, just to name one, from going to, say, Verizon or AT&T and saying, look, I'm going to pay you X amount of money to give us priority bandwidth for our streams, and while you're at it, we want you to throttle Clear Channel's iHeartRadio. So it's harder for people to be able to listen to the Clear Channel stations that are on iHeart. What would stop them from doing that? And from, without maybe a net neutrality rule, what would stop the providers, the ISPs, from saying, okay, you got a deal, it'll cost you this much and we'll do that?
It's short of net neutrality rules, nothing. I mean, it's perfectly legitimate in the world where there are no rules against it. So carriers could decide that you will only see what they want you to see, or that whatever there is not on their preferred content list, you can't get to. So the idea that the carriers could start dictating to the consumer what they could see for what they, for the price that they're paying for access, that's what scares a lot of folks and makes people like me be advocates of the concept of net neutrality, because you have these carriers that have so much control over access that there has to be some rules in order to level the playing field.
And I'm a little bit worried about it myself because, and this is one of the things, I mean, I understand that this is the direction the business is going, and I embrace a lot of that, but, the cautionary that I always have, because I've experienced this, for example, as we're talking about the streaming of our product. Now, one of the interesting things is I've noticed in the last few months that there's been a lot more buffering. Now, not with all devices, but a lot of times with the BlackBerry, when we're trying to listen to the station on iHeart and you have one of these older BlackBerry curves, there's a lot more buffering on it, and it's more difficult to listen to it in this geographic area. Now, I get up to the Bay Area. I don't have any trouble with my smartphone streaming any of our stations on iHeart. It's rock solid. But you come down here, and it's hit or miss. And all I can figure is that in this particular area, there must be something with the level of service that we have available to us in Monterey County and Santa Cruz County from the ISPs. Right? And that they don't provide the same bandwidth available to a non-metropolitan area like they do up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Like, the internet service is so much better, say, in downtown San Jose than it is in downtown Monterey, if you catch my drift, or downtown Salinas.
No, absolutely.
So the thing that worries me about it, Louis, is that we control our transmitters, right? If we don't take care of our transmitters and they break down, that's our fault and we're off the air. But, if the ISPs aren't expanding the bandwidth in a particular area that they serve, and we're putting more and more of our emphasis of people going to our digital product and using that, I'm not controlling the last thing between me and the listener. I'm
that
giving
last
that
mile
up to
concept,
somebody else, and that just frightens the heck out of me.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about. We're entering a whole new world where you have broadcasters and carriers that control more and more of our lives that we've come to depend on. Some could argue that the internet is a luxury, but if you're in business or you're transacting any sort of commerce, that's a fallacy.
Right.
And that means that those of us that depend on internet access and the internet to help in our daily life, in our daily routine, you're a little scared that you have that much dependency on somebody that can dictate terms to you, that without something like net neutrality and the FCC's oversight, we're left to our own devices.
Hey, one last thing. You always like to talk a lot about stuff up in the cloud. And one of the interesting things that's gone into the cloud now is radio commercial production. And we use a service called vCreative. Cloud-based paperless production. So when we get an order, like when I get an order to produce a new commercial for the Alvarez Technology Group, I don't see the old paper production form that has 4 or 5 hands that touched it before it gets to the recording studio and handed to me. I get an email, my company inbox, and it says, you have new production for Alvarez Technology Group. You click on it. It takes you to the sign-in page for your vCreative. You go in there, and there is all of the information, the file system number for the commercial, where it's going to be when you finish it off and put it into the computer, the actual ad copy, and then there are links to music beds and sound effects and so forth, and all of that stuff is now in the cloud.
Well, welcome to the 21st century.
I mean,
I'm glad you guys are here.
I dig it.
Good.
Oh, God. Especially, Louis, with sound effects and commercial beds being in the cloud, where I always know where I'm going to find it. I mean, look, I go back to the days of vinyl, and I can remember remember you'd walk around the radio station. Who took the sound effects album with the car horns on it, right? And you're looking for, literally, this would happen. And somebody was using it and they took it to their desk and it's sitting there. Or when we went to CDs, it was the same thing. Hey, where's the CDs with those music beds for such and such that we always use for so-and-so's business, right?
Funny.
Either it was misfiled in another CD case or somebody took it and it was in their cubicle, or even worse, a guy put it in his locker and locked it up because he was doing some production. He was going to come back the next day and finish it off. And so now you don't have access to it. Well, hey, now in this modern world, hey, we just go up on the cloud, we download the sound effects, the music beds we want, and it just makes things so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really the power of the cloud, is that it lets you, one, you don't have to create stuff, right? You don't have to build the infrastructure anymore. And just what you described, if you were even an organization like Clear Channel that wanted to build this for themselves, it would take a lot of money. It would take a lot of effort.